I pulled into my driveway after a grueling 14-hour shift at the hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, only to find a massive, industrial-looking shed sitting smack in the middle of my backyard. The thing was roughly the size of a small garage, painted an ugly beige color that clashed with everything in my carefully maintained landscape. My name is Frank Garrison, and I had been working as an emergency room physician for the past 8 years in this quiet Scottsdale suburb. The last thing I expected after dealing with 3 cardiac arrests and 2 gunshot wounds was to come home to find some kind of structure had appeared on my property like a bad magic trick. I sat in my car for a full minute, blinking hard, wondering if exhaustion was making me hallucinate. But no, the shed was real, very real, and from what I could see, there were thick power cables running from it toward the street, along with what looked like some kind of ventilation system humming on top of the structure. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I felt my blood pressure rising. I had bought this house 3 years ago specifically because the yard was perfect for my dog, a golden retriever named Benson, and for the vegetable garden I had been cultivating since I moved in. Now, there was a metal monstrosity sitting right where my tomato plants used to be. I got out of the car and walked around to the back gate, which was hanging open. That alone sent another wave of anger through me because I always kept that gate locked. Benson was at my sister's place for the week while she dog-sat, thank God, or he would have gotten out. As I approached the shed, I noticed the ground around it had been torn up, dirt and grass scattered everywhere. My garden beds were completely destroyed, months of work obliterated. The Japanese maple I had planted last spring had been uprooted and tossed aside like garbage, its roots exposed and drying in the Arizona sun. There was a small plaque on the side of the shed that read, "Silverwood Estates, HOA Equipment Station 7B. My jaw dropped. I lived in Silverwood Estates, sure, but I had never heard anything about equipment stations, and I certainly had never given anyone permission to install anything on my property. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of everything: the shed, the destroyed garden, the open gate, the cables, all of it. Just as I was documenting the damage, my neighbor, old Mr. Peterson, came walking over from his yard next door. He was in his 70s, retired, and spent most of his days keeping an eye on the neighborhood. "Frank, you finally see what they did. I tried calling you, but I think you were at work." "What the hell is this thing, Mr. Peterson?" I asked, gesturing at the shed. He shook his head, clearly disgusted. "Showed up yesterday morning. Some contractors came with a couple of trucks and just started building. I went out and asked them what they were doing, and they said the HOA hired them to install some kind of telecommunications relay station. Said they had permission and everything. I told them this was your property and you should be consulted, but they just ignored me and kept working." "A telecommunications relay station," I repeated, my voice getting louder, "on my property, without asking me. That is what they said. Worked all day yesterday and finished up this morning. I saw that HOA president, what is her name, Sharon something, she was here supervising everything with a clipboard. Sharon Whitfield, of course. She was the HOA president, a woman in her mid-50s who had made it her life's mission to control every single aspect of Silverwood Estates. She had sandy blonde hair always cut in the same severe bob, wore too much makeup, and had a voice that could strip paint. I had dealt with her exactly twice since moving in. Once when she tried to fine me for leaving my trash cans out 3 hours too long, and once when she demanded I repaint my front door because the shade of blue was not on the approved color list. Both times I had pushed back, and both times she had backed down when I pointed out the actual HOA bylaws, which she apparently liked to interpret creatively. "Did you get any of this on video?" I asked Mr. Peterson. "Some of it, yeah. Got footage of them tearing up your garden and installing that thing. I figured you would want evidence." "You're damn right I do. Can you send that to me?" "Sure thing. I will airdrop it to you right now." He pulled out his surprisingly modern iPhone, and within seconds, I had several video files on my phone. I thanked him and immediately went inside my house. My living room was exactly as I had left it, which was some small comfort. I dropped my bag, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down at my kitchen table to figure out what to do next. First, I called the HOA office number listed on their website. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Sharon's overly cheerful recorded voice told me to leave a message, and someone would get back to me within 2 business days. "This is Frank Garrison at 4782 Desert Willow Drive," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I came home today to find that the HOA has installed some kind of structure in my backyard without my permission or knowledge. This is unacceptable and likely illegal. I want someone to call me back immediately. My number is 602-555-0138. I hung up and immediately started Googling Arizona property law and HOA regulations. What I found made my blood boil even more. In Arizona, while HOAs have broad powers, they absolutely cannot enter private property and install permanent structures without the homeowner's explicit written consent. There were exceptions for emergency repairs that affected common areas or other properties, but a telecommunications relay station definitely did not fall under that category. My phone rang about 20 minutes later. It was a number I did not recognize, but it had a local area code. "Hello. Is this Frank Garrison?" a woman's voice asked. It was Sharon Whitfield, and she sounded annoyed that she was having to make this call. "Yes, this is Frank. What the hell is that shed doing in my backyard, Sharon? Mr. Garrison, please watch your tone. The structure you are referring to is HOA property, installed for the benefit of all residents of Silverwood Estates. We are upgrading our telecommunications infrastructure to provide better internet and cell service throughout the community." "I don't care what it is for," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "You cannot just come onto my property and build something without my permission. That is trespassing and property damage at minimum." "Actually, Mr. Garrison, if you read your HOA agreement, you will find that the association has the right to access any property for necessary improvements and maintenance. This falls under that provision." I pulled up the HOA documents on my computer, something I had saved when I bought the house. "I am looking at Section 4.3 right now, Sharon. It says the HOA can access properties for maintenance of common areas and emergency repairs. It says nothing about installing new permanent structures for telecommunications equipment." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, the board voted on this and approved it unanimously. We sent out notices to all affected homeowners. I never received any notice. And even if I had, a notice is not the same as consent. You need explicit written permission from a homeowner to do something like this. That is Arizona law. I suggest you take this up with the board at our next meeting if you have concerns," Sharon said, her voice taking on that condescending tone I remembered from our previous encounters. "The meeting is the 3rd Tuesday of next month at 7 p.m. Next month? That is 5 weeks away." "No, this is getting resolved now. You have 24 hours to remove that structure from my property and restore everything to how it was, or I am calling a lawyer. Mr. Garrison, you are being completely unreasonable. This equipment serves the entire community, and frankly, Your attitude is exactly the kind of selfish behavior that makes HOAs necessary in the first place. The structure stays. If you have a problem with that, feel free to take it up with the board. Goodbye." She hung up on me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. The sheer audacity of this woman was astounding. I downed the rest of my beer and immediately started looking up property lawyers in Scottsdale. I found a firm that specialized in real estate disputes and HOA conflicts. Their website listed a lawyer named Richard Martinez, who had excellent reviews and a track record of winning cases against overreaching HOAs. I called their office, and thankfully, they had someone answering even at 6 p.m. I explained the situation to the receptionist, who sounded genuinely shocked. She put me through to Richard Martinez himself, who apparently was still at the office. "Mr. Garrison, this is Richard Martinez. I just heard a quick summary of your situation. Can you walk me through exactly what happened?" I spent the next 15 minutes giving him every detail, from coming home to find the shed, to the destroyed garden, to my conversation with Sharon Whitfield. He listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing notes on his end. "Okay," Richard said when I finished. "This is pretty cut and dry, honestly. They have committed several violations here. First, trespassing and property damage. Second, violation of Arizona revised statutes regarding HOA powers and limitations. Third, possibly theft if they are using your property for commercial purposes without compensation. Do you pay dues to this HOA?" "Yes, $250 a month." "And did those dues ever mention paying for telecommunications equipment installation?" "Never." "The dues are supposed to cover landscaping of common areas, the community pool, and general maintenance." "Perfect. Here is what we are going to do. First thing tomorrow morning, I am going to file for an emergency injunction and a temporary restraining order. We will demand immediate removal of the structure and restoration of your property. We will also file suit for trespassing, property damage, and we will go after them for punitive damages because this is so egregious." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked, because while I made decent money as a doctor, legal fees could get astronomical. "My retainer is $5,000. But honestly, Mr. Garrison, I think we can get the HOA to cover all your legal fees plus damages once this goes to court." Cases like this, where the HOA has so clearly overstepped, usually settle quickly once they realize how much liability they are facing. I have dealt with dozens of these, and I have never lost one. "Okay, let us do it. What do you need from me? Send me all the photos and videos you have. Also send me your HOA documents, any correspondence with the HOA, and your property deed. I will draft everything tonight and file first thing in the morning. In the meantime, do not touch that structure, do not go near it. We want everything documented exactly as it is." I spent the next hour sending Richard everything he needed. Then, I ordered a pizza because I was too angry and exhausted to cook. While I waited for the food, I posted about the situation on the Silverwood Estates Facebook group, which was usually just people complaining about coyotes and asking for recommendations for landscapers. I included photos of the shed and the destroyed garden. Within minutes, the comments started flooding in. Apparently, I was not the only one. 4 other homeowners responded saying they had similar structures installed in their yards over the past month. One guy, David Chen, said he had tried to physically block the contractors, and the HOA had threatened to fine him for interfering with community improvements. Another woman, Lisa Rodriguez, said her vegetable garden had been destroyed just like mine, and when she complained, Sharon Whitfield told her that gardens were not a priority compared to community infrastructure. This was bigger than I thought. I called Richard Martinez back and told him about the other homeowners. He sounded even more interested now. That is excellent for our case, actually. If you can get those other homeowners to join the lawsuit, we can file a class action. That gives us a lot more leverage and splits the legal costs. Can you get me their contact information? I will reach out to them tonight. I spent the rest of the evening messaging with the other affected homeowners. All 4 of them wanted in on the lawsuit. David Chen was particularly angry because the HOA had damaged his irrigation system, flooding his basement and causing thousands in water damage. By 11 p.m., I had everyone's information sent to Richard, and I finally collapsed into bed. The next morning, I had to work another shift at the hospital, this time a regular 8-hour day shift. I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep and way too much coffee. Around 10 a.m., during a brief lull in the emergency room, Richard called me. Got the injunction. Judge Harrison signed off on it about 20 minutes ago. The HOA has to remove all structures from your property and the other plaintiff's properties within 72 hours. They are also prohibited from entering any of your properties without explicit written consent. I am having the order served to Sharon Whitfield and the HOA board right now. That is amazing. Thank you, Richard. Just doing my job. But here is the thing, Frank. I also did some digging this morning into this telecommunications equipment. Guess what I found? What? The HOA is actually leasing space to a cell phone company. They are getting paid $1,500 per month per installation. So they put these things on your properties without your permission, and they are collecting money for it. That is absolutely theft and fraud. I have already filed an amended complaint adding those charges. I felt a fresh wave of anger. Are you serious? They are making money off my property? Yep. And here is the kicker. Sharon Whitfield's husband works for the cell phone company. I found that out through some public records searches. This whole thing smells like a conflict of interest and possibly kickbacks. So what happens now? Well, the criminal aspect of this is beyond my scope, but I have already forwarded what I found to the Scottsdale Police Department's Fraud Division. They will investigate. On the civil side, we are going after them hard. Between the trespassing, property damage, theft, and fraud, you and the other homeowners are looking at substantial damages. I thanked Richard and went back to work, feeling slightly better knowing that legal wheels were in motion. My shift ended at 6 p.m. and I drove home wondering if anything would have changed. The shed was still there, of course. 72 hours had not passed yet, but there was a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, and it informed me that I was being fined $500 for allowing unauthorized structures on my property in violation of community aesthetic standards. I actually laughed out loud. The sheer insanity of fining me for the structure they had installed was beyond belief. I took a picture of the notice and texted it to Richard with the caption, "You have got to be kidding me." He responded immediately, "Oh, they just made this so much worse for themselves." That is evidence of retaliation. Judge is going to love this. That evening, I grilled a steak and sat on my back patio, staring at the ugly shed that had taken over half my yard. Mr. Peterson came over with a 6-pack of beer, and we sat together, talking about how insane HOAs could be. "I have been in this neighborhood for 30 years, Mr. Peterson said, shaking his head. "Back before it was Silverwood Estates, before they built all these new houses and formed the HOA. Used to be just a few of us out here, nice and quiet. Then the developers came, built 200 new houses, and suddenly we have got this HOA telling everyone what color their mailbox can be." "Did you have to join the HOA?" I asked. "Technically, no. I am grandfathered in." but they keep trying to get me to sign up, offering me benefits like access to the pool. I tell them I've got my own pool. I do not need theirs. Sharon Whitfield hates that I am not under her thumb. She seems like she really enjoys the power trip. Oh, she loves it. Her kids are all grown and moved away. Her husband is barely around, so this HOA thing is her whole life. She treats it like she is running a corporation instead of a neighborhood association. The next day was my day off, so I spent the morning cleaning up what I could of the garden destruction. I salvaged the Japanese maple, getting it into a large pot with fresh soil and watering it heavily, hoping it would survive. I was in the middle of this when a Scottsdale police car pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers got out, a male officer who looked to be in his 40s and a younger female officer. "Frank Garrison," the male officer asked as they approached. "That is me. Is this about the HOA situation?" "Yes, sir. I am Officer Martinez and this is Officer Chen. We are with the Fraud Division. We have been assigned to investigate the complaint filed by your attorney regarding the unauthorized structures and the alleged kickback scheme. Can we take a look at your backyard?" I led them around back and showed them the shed. Officer Martinez took photos and notes while Officer Chen examined the power connections and the equipment itself. She seemed to know what she was looking at. "This is definitely commercial telecommunications equipment," Officer Chen said. "This type of relay station is what cell companies use to boost signal. These usually require permits from the city, easements if they are on private property, and rental agreements. You got any paperwork like that?" "Nothing. I did not even know this was happening until I came home from work 2 days ago and found it here." Officer Martinez looked up from his notepad. "We have already started interviewing other homeowners in the area. Sounds like the HOA president and possibly some board members are going to have some explaining to do. We will need a formal statement from you, probably tomorrow if you are available. Can you come down to the station?" "Absolutely. Just tell me when." They spent another 30 minutes documenting everything, then left. I went inside and called Richard to update him. He sounded pleased with the police involvement. The more agencies involved, the more pressure on the HOA. They are going to have to settle this quickly or face criminal charges on top of the civil suit. I would not be surprised if we hear from their lawyer in the next day or two trying to negotiate. He was right. The next morning, I got a call from a lawyer named Patricia Hoffman, who identified herself as counsel for the Silverwood Estates HOA. Her voice was professional but strained. "Mr. Garrison, I have reviewed the injunction filed against my clients, and I have to say, there seem to be some misunderstandings here. The HOA was acting in what they believe to be the best interests of the community. Miss Hoffman, there is no misunderstanding. The HOA entered my property without permission, destroyed my garden, and installed commercial equipment they are profiting from. That is trespassing, property damage, and theft. Those are not misunderstandings. Those are crimes. I understand you are upset, Mr. Garrison. What I am calling to propose is a settlement. The HOA is willing to remove the equipment, restore your property, and waive any fines that were assessed against you. In exchange, you would drop the lawsuit. What about compensation for the damages? My garden took months to establish, and the plants they destroyed were expensive. Plus, I have had to hire a lawyer, take time off work, deal with all this stress. The HOA can offer you $5,000 for the damages and inconvenience." I almost laughed. "Miss Hoffman, that does not even cover my legal retainer. You need to talk to my lawyer, Richard Martinez. But I will tell you right now, we are not settling for anything less than full compensation for damages, all my legal fees covered, and punitive damages for what the HOA did. And that is just for me." There are 4 other homeowners in the same situation. I will reach out to Mr. Martinez, but I have to warn you, if this goes to trial, it could take months or even years to resolve. I am fine with that. The HOA has 72 hours from when they were served to remove that equipment. The clock is ticking. She hung up, and I immediately called Richard to tell him about the conversation. He was not surprised they were trying to lowball a settlement. They are scared. They know they have no legal ground to stand on. Let me handle any further communication with their lawyer. You just focus on your work and your life. I will keep you updated. The 72-hour deadline came and went with no action from the HOA. On the morning of the 4th day, Richard filed a contempt motion with the court. By that afternoon, Judge Harrison had issued a contempt ruling and ordered the HOA to pay $1,000 per day for every day the equipment remained on the properties, starting immediately. The money would go into escrow until the case was resolved. That lit a fire under them. The next morning, the same contractors who had installed the equipment showed up with a crane and started dismantling the shed in my backyard. I watched from my kitchen window, drinking coffee and feeling immensely satisfied. It took them most of the day, but by evening the shed was gone. The power cables had been removed, and they had started the process of restoring the ground where it had been installed. Sharon Whitfield showed up around 4 p.m., stepping out of her white Mercedes SUV wearing sunglasses and looking furious. She marched up to my front door and rang the bell aggressively. I took my time answering. "You happy now, Frank?" she said the moment I opened the door. Her face was red, and she was practically vibrating with anger. "You have cost this HOA tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and lost revenue, all because you could not be a team player. Sharon, you entered my property without permission and installed equipment you were profiting from. That is illegal. You should be thanking me for only suing you instead of having you arrested. You know what? Fine, you win. The equipment is being removed, but do not think this is over. I will be watching your property like a hawk, and the moment you step out of line on any HOA rule, you will be fined. I will make your life miserable here." Sharon, that sounds a lot like harassment and retaliation, both of which are also illegal. Maybe you should go talk to your lawyer before you say anything else that could be used against you in court. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish for a moment. Then she turned and stormed back to her SUV, slamming the door hard enough that I was surprised the window did not crack. Mr. Peterson, who had been watching from his yard, called over, "Well handled, Frank. That woman needs someone to stand up to her more often." The equipment removal continued for the next 2 days. The contractors did a decent job of restoring the ground, though my garden was obviously still destroyed. They laid down fresh sod where the shed had been and patched the areas where cables had been run. It was not perfect, but it was better than the destroyed wasteland it had been. A week later, I gave my formal statement to the Scottsdale Police Department. Officer Martinez recorded everything while Officer Chen took notes. They asked detailed questions about the timeline, about my interactions with Sharon Whitfield, and about the damage to my property. The whole process took about 2 hours. "We are building a case against the HOA president and potentially some of the board members," Officer Martinez told me when we finished. "The cell phone company is cooperating with the investigation." Turns out Sharon Whitfield's husband is a regional manager for the company, and he was directly involved in negotiating the placement of these relay stations. That is a clear conflict of interest, and the fact that the HOA was receiving payments without passing that on to the homeowners whose land was being used is fraud. So what happens to Sharon depends on what the DA's office decides. Could be anything from fines and restitution to actual jail time if they pursue criminal charges. These kinds of cases can take a while to fully resolve, but I can tell you, the evidence is pretty damning. Richard kept pushing on the civil side. He filed an expanded lawsuit that included not just the 5 homeowners with equipment installed on their property, but every homeowner in Silverwood Estates. His argument was that the HOA had breached its fiduciary duty to all residents by engaging in this scheme, and that all residents deserved compensation. He also argued that the HOA's leadership needed to be removed and replaced. This turned into a bigger deal than I had ever expected. Local news picked up the story. A reporter from the Arizona Republic called me for an interview, and I agreed. The story ran a week later with the headline Scottsdale HOA president accused of fraud in cell tower scheme. It detailed everything, from the unauthorized installations to the police investigation to Sharon Whitfield's husband's connection to the cell phone company. Within days, the story was picked up by local TV news. I did an interview with a reporter from Channel 12, standing in my backyard where the shed had been. The story aired during the evening news, and suddenly, I was getting calls and messages from other HOAs around Arizona saying they had similar situations. Richard was thrilled because it gave his case even more attention and put pressure on the defendants. The Silverwood Estates HOA held an emergency meeting 2 weeks after the news story aired. I attended along with probably 100 other homeowners, which was way more than their usual meetings that typically drew maybe 10 people. The meeting was held at the community center, and the room was packed. Sharon Whitfield sat at the front table with 3 board members, all of them looking uncomfortable. Sharon tried to call the meeting to order, but the crowd was having none of it. People started shouting questions immediately. Why did not we know about the cell tower deal? Where is the money from the leases going? Who approved this? Sharon banged a gavel on the table. Please, everyone, we need order. We will answer questions, but you need to raise your hands and wait to be called on. How about you answer why you committed fraud? Someone shouted from the back. I recognized David Chen's voice. The room erupted in agreement. Sharon's face turned bright red. One of the board members, a nervous-looking man named Tom something, stood up. Look, everyone, we made mistakes. We thought we were acting in the best interest of the community by improving telecommunications infrastructure. We did not realize we needed individual permission from homeowners. Bullshit, yelled Lisa Rodriguez from the side of the room. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were collecting money from that cell company and pocketing it instead of reducing our dues or using it for the community. Tom sat back down, looking defeated. Another board member, an older woman named Margaret, stood up. The board is prepared to offer its resignation, effective immediately. We think it is best for the community if new leadership takes over. That got a round of applause from the crowd. Sharon Whitfield looked like she had been slapped. Margaret, we did not discuss this. Well, I am discussing it now, Sharon. This has become a nightmare, and it is clear we have lost the confidence of the community. The right thing to do is step down. The other 2 board members nodded in agreement. Sharon stood up, gathering her papers. Fine. You all want to throw us under the bus. Go ahead. But remember, we volunteered our time for this community, and this is the thanks we get. You committed fraud, Sharon, I called out from my seat. Do not act like you are the victim here. She shot me a look of pure hatred, then walked out of the meeting. The other board members stayed and worked with the community to schedule a special election for new board members. I was asked to run, but I declined. I had no interest in getting involved in HOA politics. I just wanted to be left alone. The civil case moved forward. Richard negotiated with the HOA's insurance company, which was covering most of the defense costs. The insurance company's lawyers looked at the evidence and quickly realized they were going to lose badly if this went to trial. 3 months after the initial incident, we reached a settlement. The terms were substantial. Each of the 5 homeowners who had equipment directly installed on their property would receive $50,000 in damages. Every other homeowner in Silverwood Estates would receive a refund of 1 year's worth of HOA dues, which worked out to $3,000 per household. The HOA would also pay all legal fees, which totaled over $200,000. Additionally, the settlement required the HOA to implement new bylaws that strictly limited the board's power and required membership votes for any significant changes or expenditures. On the criminal side, things moved slower, but they did move. The Maricopa County District Attorney's Office filed charges against Sharon Whitfield and her husband for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The cell phone company fired him immediately. Sharon was also charged with multiple counts of trespassing and property damage. The trial took place 8 months after I first came home to find that shed in my yard. I attended several days of the trial, sitting in the gallery and watching as prosecutors laid out the case. They had emails between Sharon and her husband planning the whole scheme, showing how they had deliberately kept the rest of the board and the community in the dark about the financial arrangement with the cell company. They had documents showing that over the course of 6 months, the HOA had collected nearly $40,000 in lease payments that were never disclosed or accounted for in HOA financial statements. Sharon's defense was weak. Her lawyer argued that she had been trying to improve the community and had not understood the legal requirements for what she was doing. But the prosecution showed that she had been explicitly warned by the HOA's previous lawyer that the scheme was problematic, and she had gone ahead anyway after switching to a different lawyer, who she did not fully inform about what was happening. The jury deliberated for less than a day. They found Sharon Whitfield guilty on all counts. Her husband took a plea deal and received probation and community service. Sharon, as the ringleader, was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $300,000 when all the various damages and legal costs were added up. I was there in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Sharon broke down crying and her lawyer argued for probation instead of jail time. But Judge Anderson, who presided over the criminal case, was not sympathetic. "Miss Whitfield, you abused a position of trust in your community," the judge said. "You used your authority as HOA president to enrich yourself and your family at the expense of your neighbors. You trespassed on their property, damaged their possessions, and when confronted, you attempted to retaliate and intimidate them. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated." The sentence stands. After the trial, I was interviewed again by the local news. The reporter asked me how I felt about the outcome. "I feel vindicated," I said honestly. "But more than that, I hope this sends a message to other HOA boards that they are not above the law. They have responsibilities to their communities, and when they abuse their power, there are consequences." The story became something of a cautionary tale in Arizona HOA circles. Richard Martinez told me he got dozens of calls from homeowners in other communities dealing with similar issues after our case made the news. Several other lawsuits were filed against different HOAs, and the state legislature even introduced a bill to reform HOA regulations and oversight. As for me, I used some of the settlement money to completely redo my backyard. I hired a professional landscaper who transformed the space into something even better than what I had before. I installed a koi pond where the shed had been, planted new trees including 3 Japanese maples as a symbol of resilience, and built raised garden beds with an irrigation system that could survive anything short of a bulldozer. I also put in a nice patio area with a built-in grill and seating, perfect for having friends over. The new HOA board was completely different from the old one. They held regular meetings with actual transparency, published detailed financial statements every quarter, and most importantly, they actually followed the law. They reached out to me personally to apologize for what had happened, and to ask for my input on new policies to prevent anything similar from happening again. I appreciated that and did provide some suggestions, mainly around requiring membership votes for any significant decisions and implementing stronger conflict of interest policies for board members. Benson, my golden retriever, loved the new backyard. The koi pond particularly fascinated him, and he would spend hours lying on the patio watching the fish swim around. Mr. Peterson came over regularly to enjoy the space, and we would sit out there in the evenings, drinking beer and talking about everything except HOAs. My sister, who had been horrified when I first told her about the whole situation, was amazed at how it all turned out. "You could have just let them keep that shed there and avoided all the hassle," she said one day when she came over for a barbecue. "No, I could not have," I replied. "It was my property. They had no right to do what they did. If I had let it slide, what message does that send? That HOAs can do whatever they want without consequences. I guess you are right. I am just glad it is over and you came out ahead." It took almost a full year from start to finish, but eventually, everything was resolved. The settlement money hit my bank account, the criminal cases were concluded, and life returned to normal. I went back to focusing on my job at the hospital, which was stressful enough without HOA drama. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I took up woodworking as a hobby and built a nice bench for the backyard and some planters for the garden beds. One interesting development came about 4 months after Sharon Whitfield went to prison. I got a letter in the mail from her. It was forwarded through her lawyer to mine and then to me. In it, she apologized for everything that had happened. She wrote that prison had given her time to reflect on her actions and that she realized she had let power go to her head. She said she had been trying to prove something, to feel important and needed, and had lost sight of the fact that she was supposed to be serving the community, not controlling it. The letter ended with a genuine-sounding apology and a hope that I could forgive her someday. I showed the letter to Richard, who said it was probably written with guidance from her lawyer as part of an attempt to show remorse for a possible sentence reduction. Maybe that was true, but I chose to believe the letter was genuine. I wrote back a short response saying that I accepted her apology and hoped she used her time in prison to better herself. I did not forgive her completely. The damage she had caused was too real for that, but I could acknowledge her apology and move forward. The Silverwood Estates community slowly healed from the whole mess. The new board implemented a community garden in one of the common areas, partly as a symbolic gesture after several homeowners had their personal gardens destroyed. I volunteered to help set it up and teach people about vegetable gardening. It became a nice gathering place for the neighborhood, and people who had never really interacted before started forming friendships over tomatoes and zucchini. David Chen, one of the other homeowners who had been affected, became a good friend. He was an engineer working for a tech company in Phoenix, and we bonded over our shared experience and mutual love of craft beer. He helped me install some smart home technology in my house, and I helped him plan out a vegetable garden for his restored yard. Lisa Rodriguez, another affected homeowner, went on to run for the HOA board in the special election, and won. She turned out to be an excellent board member, bringing actual common sense and transparency to the role. She would occasionally call me for advice on various issues, and I was happy to help when I could. Looking back on the whole experience, it was one of the most stressful periods of my life. Between my demanding job at the hospital and the legal battle with the HOA, there were times I barely slept. But it was also one of the most important things I have ever done. Standing up for my rights and refusing to be bullied by an out-of-control HOA president not only got me justice, but helped dozens of other homeowners and led to real reforms. The case became part of Arizona HOA law precedent. Richard told me that lawyers around the state were citing our case in their own disputes with HOAs. The state legislature did pass that reform bill, which strengthened homeowner protections and increased oversight of HOA boards. It was nicknamed the Silverwood Bill in honor of our case, though the official title was much more boring. I gave a few talks at community events about HOA rights and responsibilities. I never considered myself a public speaker, but people seemed interested in hearing the story directly from me. I always emphasized that HOAs serve an important function when done right, but that homeowners need to be vigilant and informed about their rights. My parents, who lived in Tucson, were both proud and exasperated by the whole thing. My mom worried constantly that Sharon Whitfield would seek revenge when she got out of prison, despite my assurances that there was a restraining order in place, and that she would be insane to come near me after everything. My dad, a retired contractor, was mainly angry about the damage to my property and kept offering to come up and have a talk with anyone who bothered me. The Japanese maple I had rescued from the initial destruction not only survived but thrived. It grew strong in its large pot on my patio, and after a year I transplanted it into the ground in a place of honor near the koi pond. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. 2 years after the whole thing started, I was sitting in my backyard on a warm March evening, enjoying the sunset and watching Benson chase butterflies around the garden. Mr. Peterson came over, as he often did, and we sat together on the bench I had built. "You know, Frank, I have been in this neighborhood for over 30 years now," he said. "I have seen a lot of things, a lot of changes, but I have got to say what you did, standing up to that HOA like you did, that was something special. You changed this place for the better." "I just did not want a shed in my yard," I said with a laugh. "It was more than that, and you know it. A lot of people would have just complained and done nothing, or they would have given up when Sharon pushed back. But you saw it through, and now we have got an HOA that actually works for us instead of against us. That matters." I thought about his words as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He was right. It had been about more than just a shed. It had been about property rights, about standing up to bullies, about making sure that people in positions of power were held accountable. Those were important principles worth fighting for. Life went on. I continued working at the hospital, saving lives and patching people up. I expanded my woodworking hobby and started making furniture that I sold at local craft fairs. I traveled a bit, taking a trip to Colorado to go hiking and another to San Diego to visit old friends from medical school. I even started dating someone seriously, a nurse named Rachel who worked in the pediatric ward and who thought my HOA battle story was equal parts insane and impressive. The backyard remained my sanctuary. On my days off, I would spend hours out there, tending to the garden, feeding the koi, or just sitting and reading. It was exactly what I had envisioned when I bought the house, a private, peaceful space that was mine. The fact that I had to fight so hard to keep it that way made me appreciate it even more. Sometimes I would see news stories about other HOA disputes around the country, and I would shake my head at some of the ridiculous things boards tried to do. Paint color violations, fines for garden gnomes, battles over mailbox designs. It was amazing how much drama could be created over such minor things. But every now and then, I would see a story about a homeowner standing up to an overreaching HOA and winning, and I would feel a sense of kinship with them. Sharon Whitfield was released from prison after serving 14 months of her 18-month sentence, getting out early for good behavior. I heard about it through the neighborhood grapevine. She moved away from Scottsdale entirely, and last I heard, she was living with her daughter somewhere in California. Her husband divorced her while she was in prison, unable or unwilling to deal with the scandal and financial fallout. Part of me felt bad for her, despite everything. Her life had been completely upended by her own poor decisions. The restraining order remained in effect, so she legally could not come near me or my property even if she wanted to. But I did not think she would. The letter she had sent suggested she understood the magnitude of what she had done. I hoped she was building a new, better life for herself somewhere else. As for the cell phone company, they faced their own consequences. A class action lawsuit by Silverwood Estates residents resulted in a substantial settlement, and the company overhauled its policies regarding relay station installations. They could no longer partner with HOAs to install equipment on private property without direct landowner consent. The regional manager, who had been Sharon's husband, was permanently barred from the industry. 3 years after that day, I came home to find a shed in my yard. I was finally able to say the whole ordeal was completely behind me. All the legal matters were resolved, all the appeals were exhausted, all the settlements were paid. My backyard was beautiful, my life was good, and the HOA was functioning properly under competent leadership. I never forgot the lesson, though. Property rights matter. Standing up for yourself matters. Holding people accountable for their actions matters. These were not just abstract legal concepts. They were real principles that affected real lives. I had lived through a situation where someone tried to violate my rights, and I had fought back successfully. That was something I would carry with me forever. On the 3-year anniversary of finding that shed in my yard, I threw a party in the backyard. I invited Mr. Peterson, David Chen, Lisa Rodriguez, and the other affected homeowners, along with Richard Martinez and a bunch of other friends and neighbors. We grilled burgers and drank beer and celebrated not just the resolution of the legal case, but the transformation of our community. Richard gave an impromptu toast. To Frank, who refused to back down, to everyone here who stood up for their rights, and to the principle that no one, not even an HOA president with a power complex, is above the law. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Benson barked excitedly, and I laughed. It was a perfect evening, warm but not too hot, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the Japanese maples. The koi swam lazily in their pond, and the garden beds were overflowing with tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. As I looked around at all the people gathered in my backyard, at the space I had fought so hard to reclaim and had transformed into something beautiful, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It had been a long, difficult fight, but it had been worth it. Every bit of stress, every angry phone call, every court appearance, every dollar spent on legal fees, it had all been worth it to stand up for what was right and to protect what was mine. And that ugly beige shed that had started it all. It was gone, replaced by beauty and peace and good memories. That felt like justice, That felt like victory. That felt like home.